So, um, so the perspective I wanted to share is really this one piece is based upon the Rav Soloveitchik. Rabbi Har was actually with me many years ago in Boston. We went for the keynote year during Tisha B'Av, and the Rav made it explicitly clear, without any doubt, that that the day that we mourn Jewish tragedies in general is Tisha B'Av. Why Tisha B'Av? Because Tisha B'Av, when we had the Gullus and the Korban Abayis, as a result of that, everything else, flowed from that. So whether it was the Khmelnytsky massacres or pogroms in Russia or the Crusades or even the Shoah, and at that time he mentioned, Jewish Israeli soldiers killed, whether it was in the Olympic Games or whether it was Israelis killed in Lod Airport or terrorist attacks. So that's all a result of Yom Hashoah, of Tisha B'Av. Having said that, technically one would say, well, what's Yom Hashoah from a halachic standpoint? So one could argue that, of course, what the Rav is saying is correct. He was the Gadol Hador, and his perspective is a correct perspective. But nonetheless, we don't have school Tisha B'Av in the summertime, and even if we did, in August, we'd probably be off for the fast day. So I want to use this opportunity educationally to, I guess, share some of the messages. So is Tisha B'Av the day? Yes. In fact, on Tisha B'Av, you see they have elegies, they have keynotes that talk about the Crusades. So you see the Crusades didn't happen on Tisha B'Av. It happened over many years, but still no, they commemorated the tragedy on the Tisha B'Av. And that's why there are those that actually include, the Baba Rabbi and others have keynotes that they added in on Tisha B'Av about the murder of the Jews during the Shoah. But anyway, we're not there. It's April, it's not August. So I wanted to share some of the perspectives. And two things which are similar that jump out from Tisha B'Av. If you remember some of the keynotes, I know sometimes it's a long day and when is it going to be over? When is the fast over? I understand that, but again, being a bit older, you get used to it and you start to reflect about the day. So I'm sure as many Rabbeim do, you look at the keynotes, you think about the keynotes, and there's two things that stand out about that really are applicable to the Shoah. Number one was the fact that early on it talks about the suddenness of what happening. The suddenness means that we didn't expect it. The Jews in Jerusalem at the time, life was good. In Europe, 1939, 1940, you're sitting at your Friday night table. Life is good. You have your whole family there. And all of a sudden, literally the next day, hours later, in the middle of the meal, Nazis come banging on the door and they're dragging out the father. They're cutting off his beard. They're torturing him. They're beating him, right? This is what's happening. You have a successful business and you're selling whatever you're selling, silverware, menorahs, books. I don't care what you're selling. When all of a sudden Nazis come in, smash your windows, grab you, throw you on the street, and they give you a toothbrush and you have to clean out the street. Imagine that bizayon. A woman has a baby. Oh, I'm so happy I have the baby. They take the baby out of her arms. They smash the baby's head against the wall. The suddenness, totally unexpected. So I think that's one aspect of the tragedy that is definitely similar to the calamity that befell our people during the Korban Abayis. And the other thing is the keynotes also talk about the same thing. Nobody cared. In fact, it said the nations around us, they clapped. Yeah, they got the Jews. Good, they deserve it. The Poles, the Lithuanians, the Ukrainians, the Latvians, you name it. They were happy to take over our houses. They were happy to take our clothing. They were happy to take the jewelry from the parents, right? They were happy to take the silverware, everything they have. My mother told me the Nazis came into her house. She was 14 years old at the time, like your age, guys, teenagers. And she's there. She's being chased out of school. She went to Beis Yaakov in Krakow. And she gets out of school, and the Nazi youth start screaming and chasing her. Jew, Jew, get the Jew. So she runs home, and she thinks she's safe for a day. Next day, they came in. They rampaged the house. They dragged everything out, even the tablecloths. Can you imagine sitting at home, going home tonight, and all of a sudden, anti-Semites are coming and stripping everything out of your rooms? Unimaginable. And I'm sure the people are there. Her father, who was protecting, is saying, hey, you can't do that. Guys smack him in the face. They knock him down. The suddenness. And you know what? No one cared. A lot of these people perpetrating the crimes were actually neighbors, supposedly friends, because they're very happy to move into the bigger house. They're very happy they don't have to pay for stuff in Walmart when they go shopping. It's right here in the Jew's house. The TV, the phone, whatever they had. Obviously, they didn't have that stuff in, but all the stuff that goes on in the house, the beds, silverware, I get it for free. So they were happy. That, I think, is another aspect which is shocking, because you think there's a certain sense of security we all have from our neighbors. Our neighbor, oh, good morning, how are you? It's snowing today. Yeah, what's going to be? 3 more inches of snow. You talk to your neighbor. All of a sudden, that's the guy that's rampaging your house. That's the guy that's beating up a parent, raping a mother. This is what's going on. But I wanted to talk about the heroic aspect, because I told you the idea of this day, which is not necessarily a halachic day, but it's an educational day, was inspired by the Israeli government, the Knesset, and it was really called the Yom Zikaron, Yom Zichron, the day that reminds us of the Shoah, which is the tragedy, and the Gvura. So I wanted to talk about the Gvura, the bravery aspect, the resistance aspect. And again, many people feel that, the Jews went to slaughter like sheep. How come they didn't fight back? And I wonder about that a lot, and I've given a lot of thought. And I'll share briefly one aspect. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but came to my mind anyway. Thousands of Jews and, 5 Nazis. Yeah, but imagine if, and I don't want to spook anybody, imagine if a band of marauders, the police, well, guess what? The police departments in each neighborhood turned out to be allies of the Nazis. So we look at the police to protect us. But imagine if the Nassau County Police came with 5 cars around Rambam, Hafter, Young Israel, Lawrence Seahurst, Beth Shalom, DRS down there, South May, not far away. And they went methodically, building by building, 5 guys with guns that come in, okay, everybody out. No one's going to resist. You're going to get shot. So now I have 180 guys on the street, Washington Avenue. Then they go down the block. There's 2 guys guarding us. If you talk, they'll shoot you. There's no communication allowed by the Jews. You could not even have a radio. Forget phones. No phones, no radios, no texting. You couldn't tell someone else what's happening, right? They surround you. You don't know what's going to happen. I guess you won't resist. And then they bring out the people from Hafter and Beth Shalom, and they march you, and the next school, and May, and Halm, and Hafter. And before you know it, 5,000 students, teachers, right? Lined up on the street, and you have 10 Nazis guarding you. It's not so unimaginable. It's unimaginable it could happen, but I can understand it from a logistics standpoint, that you can have 10,000 people being guarded by 10 or 15 guards, and then they put you in concentration camps, and again, you have no ability to fight back. You step out of line, they kill you. They kill you. And they kill you to make a lesson out of you that no one else should do. Not only they kill you, they'll torture you first. And they may even have another Jew force him to beat you, which is horrible, right? And the guy some Jews might not do it, because I'm not going to hit another Jew. Or they may do it because they want to save their lives, and then they kill him also. So everyone is scared. Everyone is totally spooked. So the resistance took various forms. It took the form of physical resistance. And again, I suggest for those that are able, mature, emotionally, intellectually, to Google Jewish resistance during the war, and you'll find articles, some overall and some in-depth. Resistance in Treblinka, which they had, resistance in Sobibor, which is another horrible camp, which they had. And by the way, they didn't just have they had hundreds of concentration camps and sub-camps, some that we're not aware of. So Auschwitz wasn't just Auschwitz and Birkenau. There were a lot of camps around it that were, doing the same horrific work that they had in the main camps. They had partisans. We had some speak in school over the past 25 years. The Bielski brothers, we had a member of the family spoke here. You can look them up. Amazing people. They hid in the forests and they would attack Germans. I found out, actually, Aaron told me, I wasn't aware of it, that my mother's sister, who I never met because she was murdered in the Holocaust, she died in the Holocaust, was someone that in 1942, my family came from Krakow, Poland. Krakow was the hub, the center of the Nazis. When they took over Poland, they established their headquarters in Krakow. So while the Nazis, Yom Hashoah, were doing their shopping for their families, because of course you have to have a merry December 25th, they were known to dine in a certain cafe. So my aunt, I never met, I didn't even know this until a few weeks ago, was a Beis Yaakov girl, but she also got involved with Bnei Akiva. And she and a group of other Polish Jewish girls went into the cafe, and I guess they made believe they were ordering something, and they set off a bomb. They died in the bombing. So she kind of died in the bombing, and they killed, they say, up to 12 Nazis were murdered in that site. So there's a sense of resistance in terms of physical resistance. And I would have to believe that the Jewish population, even though we lost so many horrible millions of people, and a student many years ago said it wasn't just the loss of the 6 million, of course, but the generations that came after. How many great Talmidei Chachamim there could have been? Doctors, lawyers, scientists, entrepreneurs, you name it, social workers, rabbis, teachers, right? So those 6 million weren't able to produce children. In fact, any children they have oftentimes were murdered during the Shoah. So it was a tragedy of many, many proportions. But the resistance took place, in terms of physical resistance. And then I think I want to touch on other types of resistance. Again, I speak from the experience of my family, but I would say whatever I'm aware of happened thousands of times over, because I don't know the history of other families. So my mother, when she was in concentration camp, and I may have sent it out on a link, an article in the Wall Street Journal about her a little while ago, her maiden name before she got married was Deutscher. Again, you're talking to someone who's 15 years old. It's your age, guys. Okay. Her name is Deutscher. Deutsch is German name, right? So the Nazi government beat her frequently. How dare a Jewish girl have a German name? It's an excuse. What's she supposed to do? And at one point where it's a particularly severe beating, and she's obviously screaming in pain, he says, "I'll stop if you beg me." She wouldn't give in. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. So that's a different form of resistance. It's not a resistance in terms of picking up a gun, which she persisted in, or whatever, a bomb she couldn't do. She's already in concentration camp. But it's a psychological type of resistance. I am a Jew. I'm not going to cow to you. You're a Nazi. You're a dog. You're a zero. Right now, you have a whip. I don't. You can hit me. I can't do anything about it. But I'm not going to do what you want me to do. I'm not going to ask and beg for forgiveness. My wife's father, again, these are only stories that I know firsthand. And I would venture to say that this story has repeated itself tens of thousands of times in different families who probably have their own history. That's why I recommend, if anyone knows that there still is a Holocaust survivor in your shul, not only is it tremendous chesed to say good Shabbos and hello, but to spend the time to hear a story, his or her story. My father-in-law, who passed away in the past year, see this? Looks familiar, shofar. He actually blew the shofar in concentration camp in 1944. So, to me, that's crazy. Now, I'm sure he didn't blow 100 kolos, and he wasn't doing over 3 hours. Well, he just blew, just whatever he needed, 9 kolos to be yotze. But it's not just the halacha, it's the commitment. It's the fortitude that he had to do that in concentration camp where people could hear. In fact, the story I heard was the Nazi commandant came in and left. Why did he leave? Because in 1944, the Germans already knew they were losing the war. So for whatever reason, that guy said, I'm not going to kill this guy. But it's a chance. He didn't know that. He also baked matzahs. He had access to the kitchen. So he took some flour. So he baked matzahs on Pesach. Again, not $40 a pound, 10 matzahs, 2-3 matzahs for him and some friends. mind-boggling. For the guys that, hold on, for the guys that once in a while forget tefillin, have a bunch of yarmulkes, the guy forgets yarmulke. Sometimes the guy forgets tefillin. So a couple of guys come to me. So I have an extra pair of tefillin, right? A small pair. And I just checked them with the software and begin there. They're 100% kosher. And what's unique about these tefillin? My father-in-law,
You could put them in your pocket.
right, he put it in his pocket because every Tuesday in the camp, thank you, right, every Tuesday, he was in a camp called Westerbork. You can look it up online. It was a labor death transport camp. People died there, of course. Anne Frank, you've heard her name, was in Westerbork, and she got sent to Auschwitz. Every Tuesday, the trains would lead to Auschwitz, and they kind of knew what's going to happen. So he said, I want to be able to keep these film with me so I could put it on one last time. One last time? I don't mean to be critical. Is that how we look at art film? It's such a zuchos, such an opportunity for us to daven every day. My father looked at it that way. No matter what happens, I got to put those tefillin on. Those tefillin are special. Think about that. There's an amazing book written. It's in English and Hebrew. Okay, in Hebrew it's called Mimamakim, from the depths. In English it's called Responsive from the Holocaust. I have both. It's written by Rabbi Ephraim Oshry. By Ephraim Oshry, again, way back when in the early years, we had the privilege of having Rabbi Oshry speak to our Talmidim. He has since passed on. He was a Noda Talmud Chacham, Lithuanian Jew, and he wrote down the questions that he dealt with during the Shoah. And if you read the index, they tear your heart out in terms of some of the questions. But I think this is also a form of resistance. I'll just share two with you, just in terms of the topic. Does a ghetto home need a mezuzah? Right. That's what the Jews were asking. So we're in Auschwitz, and we're stuck there, and they're getting beaten every day. And by the way, the amount of food they got, I don't mean anything to be critical, but I think put in perspective. Because we all wonder, what do we have for breakfast? You have breakfast. What do we have for lunch? What's going to be for dinner? The steak is a little cold, right? So the answer is, in many cases, the Germans calculated scientifically. They could feed a person 100 calories a day. 100 calories a day, you know what that is? I don't know, it's maybe one little square of chocolate, maybe it's a cup of tea. That's for the day. That's what they had a day. Why? Because if you give a guy 100 calories a day, they could survive and work for you. They didn't keep the Jewish survivor. They work for you for a month until they die of starvation, right? So you're in Auschwitz, right? And you're there and the beds, the beds. When we have a Shabbaton, you go home, you have a nice comfy bed with a pillow and a blanket. No. If you're sleeping on a slab of wood with 2 or 3 people in the same thing. So in one small area, you're packed. And if you move, you're on top of the other guy. So the question is, do you need a mezuzah on the barracks? Crazy question. Any paskins? No. You know why? Because the halacha is, even though through the whole analysis, it's not a permanent structure. People are going to die. It's not a permanent structure because no one really wants to be there. You're forced to be there. So it's not a type of place you'd want to be. And you want to get out of there as soon as you can. So you don't need a mezuzah. Could agree, disagree. I'm just trying to show the issues, the piskei halacha they dealt with. Okay. Another case, which we'll think is way back when, is a sidewalk paved with Jewish gravestones permitted to be walked on, which is what the Nazis, anti-Semites have done this throughout the year. I had years ago a chance to travel in different places. I saw even in Spain, they took the tombstones, the matzevos, that were of a Jewish person that died, and they put it on the street. So you would step on it. Okay, and that's what the Nazis did. That's what the Jordanians did during the 6-Day War. They took tombstones, they made it into toilets, latrines. So you have to step on it when you go into the bathroom. So are you allowed to step on those matzevos? He said no. He said no, because Their whole purpose, again, agree, disagree. Their whole purpose was to be mevaza, to degrade the Jewish people. We can't be party to that. We can't step on it. We'd have to kind of walk around. You see, we treat it like an actual grave. You don't trample on a grave. So these are some of the shilas that he dealt with. There are many, many more, which are heart-rending shilas. I just want to show that there was different types of resistance. Resistance in terms of fighting back, which I heard about my aunt. Resistance in terms of the Warsaw Ghetto. You all heard about the Warsaw Ghetto, where the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto fought the Nazis. They killed, I think, 300 Nazis, longer than the entire Polish army, which didn't last as long as the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto. So there's different types of resistance, physical resistance. There's resistance in terms of, practices, Jews doing mitzvos under the worst of conditions. And of course, the resistance in terms of keeping halacha. You're not going to force me to give up my Judaism. You're not going to force me to give up my Torah. And again, we read about Rabbi Akiva in the time of the Churban, when they wanted to kill him in the worst way. They tortured him. And Chazal say, Yatzasa nishmasa b'achas. His soul went out with the word one, meaning he's saying Shema Yisrael. I may have mentioned, maybe I mentioned to Mashir. I once heard Rabbi Spiro, so Zayin Gazunti, he's in Eretz Yisrael now, say, what's so special? What's so special of saying Shema Yisrael? He said Shema Yisrael. Of course he said Shema Yisrael. When every Jew in Auschwitz was going to be sent to the gas chambers, they knew they were going to die, they said Shema Yisrael. So he said an interesting shot. He said, you know what the idea is? It was man kriya Shema. When it came time to keep it halacha, nothing else cared. Amazing. So that is the strength of our people, and I think is the strength of those that went through the Shoah. And I think it's something that we should think about. And again, we have it good, we have it easy. We get 3 meals a day with a bed and a yeshiva and a camp and a shul and a family. When you're by yourself, my mother, my father came to this country, like many Holocaust survivors, no family, no nothing, no language, no money. How do you survive? And you went through horrible tortures yourself, and you survived, you built. So I think those are some of the lessons. I want to close with one thing. Someone sent me a very nice thing from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs that passed away recently. And he says like this: the Shoah survivors are among the most inspiring people I have had the privilege to meet. Remarkably, despite coming eyeball to eyeball with the angel of death, they used to call Mengele, the angel of death, because my mother went to Auschwitz, as many others did. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Okay. So despite that and the unimaginable losses each one of them suffered, parents, siblings, children, so many of them fulfilled the words of Moshe Rabbeinu's great command, Uvacharta v'chaim, choose life. In doing so, they chose life not just for themselves, but for their children, grandchildren, and all future generations. So I think, on a large extent, we're the beneficiaries of that. And it's really our, I'd say, opportunity / obligation to continue that. Continue learning Torah, to continue davening with hopefully greater kavanah, to put on tefillin, to do mitzvahs, to appreciate what we have, and hopefully to inspire others as well. That's it. Go back to Shia and learn. Thanks, guys.
Shakar, thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.